partially removed or correct. Contention 1 is deterioration. U.S. infrastructure is in need of repair. The National Economic Council states in 2014 that 65% of America's roads are in poor condition, disproportionately in low-income areas. Schaefer of NPR adds in 2014 that 2.1 trillion gallons of water are lost every year because of aging storage infrastructure. Because deficient infrastructure affects everyday life. Overhelming of the Business Roundtable added in 2015 that underperforming infrastructure costs U.S. households an annual loss of $3,100 in personal income. Reynolds of the American Water Works Association cautions in 2011 that delaying spending on restoration efforts can lead to degraded public services and higher cost potential in the case of emergency repair. Tyson of the New York Times in 2011 corroborates finding that a project that costs $5 million to fix now may cost over $30 million in 2 years. The U.S. will have to catch up with overdue investments eventually, and the time is now. Reynolds concludes that if we wait any longer, deferred infrastructure costs could triple the cost for a normal family by driving up utility bills and local taxes. This would hit those in poverty the hardest, as the WEF explains that higher bills cut into disposable income of impoverished households, adversely affecting their ability to pay for needed food, heat, and medical care. Conversely, Trey Hoff of the Center for American Progress finds in 2013 that making the investments needed to fix infrastructure would create 2.4 million well-paying jobs per year in retail and operations, disproportionately benefiting the poor and middle class. Coker to Think Progress adds in 2014 that 90% of jobs created by infrastructure spending would be long-lasting and high-paying, while Gibson of Georgia State University writes in 2014 that a 3% increase in infrastructure spending would boost the wealth level of America's poor citizens by 147%, decreasing income inequality by 11%. Contention 2 is community revitalization. Infrastructure integrates rich and poor communities, allowing for inclusive economic development that disproportionately benefits the poor. Chappell of UC Berkeley explains in 2001 that large-scale public investments are the driving force behind gentrification, a process by which richer people move to poorer communities. This is because infrastructure projects such as public transportation, improved education, and better roads provide more attractive amenities to rural residents. Hartley of the Cleveland Reserve Bank writes in 2013 that the best measure for this effect is the rise in property values, and Pollock of Northeastern University confirms that in 90% of cases, increased infrastructure investment increased home values at a rate faster than surrounding communities. Despite a marginal increase in costs, Byrne of Georgetown University concludes in 2003 that gentrification is good on balance for the poor. This is true for 3 reasons. The first is attention politics. Leonard of the Brookings Institution explains in 2001 that an influx of richer residents brings with it political influence and more consideration from the government. Freeman of Columbia University showed this in 2011 that gentrifying neighborhoods see greater tax revenues and are thus more likely to finance affordable housing development and improve education services for the poor, far offsetting any increases in rent costs. He quantifies that low-income families living in gentrified neighborhoods experience residential stability rates 24% higher than non-gentrified counterparts. The second way is development. Trout of Rutgers University finds in 2014 that 70% of all long-term poverty in the U.S. is caused by negative environments of crime, low education, and a lack of opportunity in high-poverty neighborhoods. As high-income residents move in, they reshape the economic development by A, bringing in educational opportunities, and B, triggering regional economic multipliers by spending more on local businesses. Thus, Hurst of University of Chicago enumerates in 2010 that poor communities that are in closer vicinity to rich neighborhoods experience a 23% reduction in poverty and a 25% increase in college degree attainment. But the third way is jobs. Bunton of Slate Magazine explains that gentrified neighborhoods contain better job opportunities compared to others because the rich bring entrepreneurship and business prospects with them. Meltzer of St. Louis Reserve Bank consequently indicates in 2015 that the number of available local jobs increased by 19% post-gentrification. Vinny, the Business Insider, explains in 2013 that in a thriving labor market, the working class has more control. Because workers can leave one job knowing others are available, they can easily demand higher wages. When job growth weak, the tables turn. Employers have the upper hand because anyone asking for higher pay is replaceable. The effect is contextualized by Hurst, who finds that in gentrified neighborhoods, wages for the poor are 11% higher. Overall, because the poor have far more to gain from this community growth than the rich, Naomi cites from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco writes in 2011 that a 0.9 standard deviation increase in income segregation leads to a 1 standard deviation increase in income inequality. Thank you for this. We're very proud of this firm. We'll learn a little bit. A lot of people we wouldn't have been able to get here. So first I'd like to start by thanking our coach, Mr. Miner, for all of the support, all this dissection late at night. And thank you to Art Advisory, Mark Allsight, and Sean Gallagher for being our inspiration and our captain while we were Thank you to our parents for putting up with all the stuff that we go through. Thank you to XRP Supplements for being our sponsor. Thank you to Sam Salinas. Thank you for Thomas Kraft. You always be in our hearts. That's a couple of years ago. And thank you. And with that in mind, let's do it. So, leave my judges. Opponents. Order. Mediate the resolution. Observation 1. Breaking the cycle of income inequality. According to the New York Times in 2003, welfare spending has profoundly changed. For shifting money from cash assistance to childcare, education, training, and other services intended to help poor people get jobs and stay off welfare. According to Harvard economist Claudia Golden, the growing differences in the earnings of college graduates and high school graduates explain between 60 and 70% of the recent rise in wage inequality. Functionally, a high school education has become less meaningful, and a college education more so. Increased spending on needs-tested welfare programs can address both of these problems. Contention 1 is framing. Subpoint A, workforce support and training programs. According to a Northwestern study, changes in the economy have made it so having more than 6 months of unemployment makes it almost impossible to get a job. The Center for American Progress further quote, lifetime earnings are diminished with each missed year of work, equating to 2% to 3% less earnings each year thereafter. They continue that this is where short-term national service employment programs come in. And while further implementing these programs will increase spending, it fits squarely within the fiscal balance and political climate that exists today. The Center for American Progress report continues that because federal dollars are typically matched with corporate funds, a multiplier effect accrues, which allows the employment of 57,000 people for less than $1 billion. The Journal of Labor Economics further reports that one such program, the Workforce Investment Act adult program, increases long-term employment prospects by 15%, while increasing wages by $2,800 each year. Subpoint B is vocational programs. According to the Brookings Institute, current federal training programs for disadvantaged and dislocated workers operate mainly through the Department of Labor. They further, however, that existing resources have been stretched thin to meet the needs of a growing number of unemployed workers seeking assistance for their efforts to find re-employment. The Hamilton Project reports that participation in year-long vocational training programs raises employment by around 30%. U.S. News furthers that in fields like healthcare, obtaining a vocational degree can increase income by 65% a year. Contention 2 is education. Subpoint A, Head Start. Evidence consistently shows that increased benefits of Head Start, yet according to the class, in the status quo, less than 4% of eligible children are enrolled, meaning that millions of kids are missing out on the following benefits. First is higher IQ. A study by Nelson in 2003 found that due to the neuroplasticity of younger children, those who participated in Head Start increased their IQ by 0.5 standard deviations or 7 points. This is important because Wade finds that IQ is linearly correlated with income over a lifetime. Additionally, AW concluded that individuals with a higher IQ tend to have higher income due to being creative, analytical, and practical thinking. Finally, Terman, who ran the longest-running longitudinal study of the effects of IQ, found that individuals with higher IQ could earn up to 6 times as much as their peers. Second is high school attendance. In a comprehensive meta-analysis, Barnay found that Head Start makes students 6% more likely to graduate from high school. And according to CCA point out, high school graduates make $200,000 more on their lifetime. Third is attend college. According to Linwick of U Chicago, Head Start makes kids 19% more likely to go to college. Subpoint B is college. The Obama administration has proposed allowing students to take on more credits and reinstating year-round eligibility as a Pell Grant. The Urban Institute furthers that these programs have a large impact because staying in school longer is expensive because you take more time out of the labor force. Consequently, the University of Alabama reports the loss of similar Pell Grant programs previously implemented at the state level led to a 47% decline in enrollment. They further that under the expanded Pell Grant, they saw a 20% higher completion rate. The Brookings Institute impacts this, finding that an associate's degree increases earnings by up to 22%, translating to $745,000 in earnings. Moreover, the Hamilton Project reports that even those who don't graduate can expect to make $100,000 more. The UCLA study finds that a 1% increase in the supply of college graduates raises high school dropouts' wages by 1.9% and high school graduate wages by 1.6%. Consequently, the Cornell Daily Sun reports educating our people is a prerequisite to solving income inequality. And for all these reasons, I urge a strong con ballot. Thank you. Are you ready to crossfire?
My call for $57,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, are you ready?
So, what is the negative attitude? What happens if you increase the resolution?
Well, we one, increase spending on training programs, and two, we increase spending on education.
Okay, so like
Head Start and culture.
the concession I want from you is, will you defend all of the programs you list in your case in your summary and final focus speech?
I mean, like, not necessarily. I mean, what are you trying to
Okay,
do?
that's fine. You can have the question.
Okay, so let's talk about, like, the jobs you guys create, right? Like, how do you know they're going to be?
All right, so like we're gonna read evidence in rebuttal about how like new rules are gonna limit, like new Supreme Court rulings are gonna limit these jobs and like infrastructure spending to go to areas and like these the first big infrastructure grants that came in after that Supreme Court ruling went almost exclusively to poor areas. The general trend right now is towards poor areas. Rich areas are already developed, and they're like, okay, why do we spend more money there?
No, not about, like, the infrastructure itself. It's about the jobs, right?
Well,
Like, according to The Atlantic, if you've been unemployed for more than 6 months, the chance of you getting a job is less than 2%.
Okay, so like if people who have already been unemployed for 6 months, how do you impact that?
Well, we specifically tell you that instead of, like, private corporations giving them jobs, the government is going to be giving them jobs, and also they're not going to reach this 6-month job because if they are unemployed, they can simply just get job training and training on the job.
The first thing I was asking is that if they've already spent these 6 months, then like if your card applies, then neither side can help these people who have been unemployed for more than 6
Wait, what are you
months.
talking about?
But second,
Ours is a federal program. It's not like private corporations that
how
may
many
be contracted by
jobs
the
does your
government.
federal program create? Like how much?
Well, we
people
tell you
the
that for every
government
$1 billion we spend, we can create 57,000 jobs, which is more than anything
What is
you
it?
guys
Okay,
do.
what are we going to be doing for the government? How could this many people be getting employed?
I mean, like, anything, well, we specifically tell you that they're going to be training, like,
Okay.
on the job, right? Like, so the government
That's
is
not
going to,
answering my question. What are they going to be
Okay.
doing for the government?
I mean, like, things like different projects, like,
We need that many people to build government projects.
Yeah.
Okay, and additionally, Mass can bring evidence as to how all government projects are funded by public-private partnerships, and so they would still link into the impacts we talked
no,
about.
but the thing is, like, it's a welfare program,
Like,
right? Like,
limited
there has,
impact.
it has to be means tested, that's the whole point of it.
Wait, what?
Like, you have to prove that you've been unemployed, whereas the jobs that you guys are creating aren't means tested, so anybody can get the job.
Oh, no, okay, but like we tell you that most of the jobs go to low-skilled workers. We have evidence for that. Can I ask you a question that's really important?
Sure.
On Head Start, right? What has the White House said about its own program after like 10 years?
I mean, like, you tell
It
me.
said that it was a failure, and not just in terms of access like you talked about, but that it didn't create any positive benefits for children who participate.
Wait, what do you mean? It didn't create any positive benefits?
Like,
We
the
tell you
White House-
increase IQ. We tell you more high school.
Well,
like,
the White House
tell you there's
obviously
increase
doesn't
in
do any of that, and they created the program Head Start.
Okay, so did they do a study on this, or did they just release like a press? Like,
Well, no, they just read all of the studies on it and realized.
really? Well, they clearly didn't read these studies because these studies. Okay, which part? I was at Hamilton. I'm not sure. Just the link part. Oh, employment by 30%.
Yeah, sorry. 15 seconds, and just can I say like the part about how like 2% every time and I won't need it during my speech. During his rebuttal? Yeah. Oh, yeah, my bad. Yeah, sorry, my bad. Yeah. Sorry about that. So it's 0.2% or
Oh, the Atlantic.
yeah. Sorry, yeah. One-off overview. Can we just get that down? Or it really doesn't matter what you vote actually. Oh yeah. Well, depends on where you vote. Yeah. Yeah, you can do it. Yeah. A is the interpretation. The negative may not read more than one unconditional advocacy. B is the violation. The negative proposes 4 different advocacies of which they only need to extend one to win the round. C are standards. 1 is reciprocity. We have to defend the NC harms unconditionally, not just the harms of specific plans. Additionally, it is much easier for them to gain access to the ballot because running multiple plans gives them multiple roads to the ballot. This puts them at a 4-to-1 structural advantage over us. Reciprocity is key to fairness because it ensures debaters who have to do the same amount of work to gain access to your ballot. Second is predictability. We have no way of knowing which one of their plans that they are going to go for, which means we can't form a coherent strategy to educate this is supercharged because they get a positive time trade-off every time they pick out of our turns or responses. Strategy is key to fairness because debaters can't win rounds without a coherent strategy. Time skew is key to fairness and outweighs because it's a prerequisite towards making arguments. D is the voter. Reject them on face because they undermine fairness. 2 justifications. 1. Debate is a competitive activity with wins and losses. No debater should have an advantage. This also precludes your ability to determine the better debate. And 2. The round is irreparably skewed. We have to invest in time to alter our strategy to check back the abuse to prevent it in the future. Now to the overview. Sharkey09 of NYU writes that neighborhood poverty alone accounts for a greater portion of the downward mobility gap than the effects of parental education, occupation, labor force participation, and education overall. This is going to be key because it makes our second contention the weighing mechanism of the round. If we win community development and end neighborhood poverty will reduce it substantially, we functionally outweigh their entire case. Go to contention 1 on training. What you have to recognize here is that both of the plans don't provide any sense of urgency. They're going to come up here and read you this Atlantic analysis that says that over time people lose skills in order to get jobs. But what we tell you is that is not uniquely increasing, especially considering the amount of education in the status quo is expanding. What you have to recognize is that the policy making happens in seriatim, that means that the U.S. government deals with one issue at a time rather than multiple concerns all at once. The Municipal Center and Research Service finds that policymakers can only serve so much time, attention, and resources onto one policy, and they are often forced to choose between more. Brian Jones of UNC adds that our government tends to drop issues out of consideration, meaning that there are trade-offs and one issue crowds out the other. This is the only analysis on how prioritization works in the round. It is what comes first. And this is key because we tell you in our case that from Reynolds, if we defer spending now, the cost of spending will triple the size of a poor family's bills later on the road. And Tyson, who says that a project which requires $5 million to cut now or to fix now will cost 6 times more, over $30 million in 2 years. You get these same impacts that they talk about whether you do it now or whether you do it later. And this is true for their second contention as well. Whereas if you vote for the affirmative to prioritize infrastructure first, you're saving money which goes to the poor and you're preventing those bills from increasing. Insofar as that's true, I don't have to respond to any of their arguments. They have to first link into this framework of prioritization. Go to contention 2 first on Head Start. 1. Expanding funding does not mean expanding the program. Douglas Besheroff of the Journal of Policy Analysis writes that the best indication of Head Start's declining reputation comes from low-income parents themselves, who are choosing not to place their children in Head Start and have instead opted for regular child care or asking relatives to care for their parents or for their children. This problem has gotten so severe that the program has essentially run out of eligible 4-year-olds to enroll within. This means that increasing investment won't increase the number of people on Head Start. All the events that they talk about are not a reason to vote for them. But second, Andrew Coulson of the New York Times writes in the best study on Head Start from the White House, which controls a random assessment nationally representative, not a single test out of 114 showed a reliable, statistically significant effect from participating in Head Start. You prefer this analysis over anything that they're going to read you because one, it's from the actual people who implemented the program. Obviously, they're going to be unbiased and they're going to want to report on whether or not they succeeded. Two, it has the biggest sample, and three, it has the best result, best method of finding results. Then on Pell Grants. First, Net 15 of the Daily Caller writes in the status quo, close to $3 billion in Pell Grant aid is going unclaimed. This is because 47% of high school kids never bother to fill out forms, regardless of what time it is in the year, and increasing spending doesn't solve if the money continues to go unclaimed. Then you turn your impact holistically, because Plotnick 2000 of U Washington explained that large welfare benefits stigmatize families who see them as dependent on government handouts, which causes them to lose self-esteem, internalize society's negative evaluations of them, and ultimately creates a long-term developmental problem for children, reducing their belief and their ability to succeed. And this is going to be key, because he finds that for every $1,000 in welfare income, it reduces schooling by nearly 1/5 of a year for students. And this is going to be really problematic for them because it precludes a lot of their impacts about college attendance, high school graduation, and income, which are all dependent on first graduating from high school. And insofar as the Plotnick evidence turns that back, you're voting for us there. Now, quickly on our case, the best way that you can vote for us is on the only analysis of prioritization in the round, which comes from the rebuttal, specifically saying that you have to do something first. And we are the only team that gives you a reason why infrastructure has to come first. The costs accelerate, and as a result, because it increases by sixfold, you have to affirm. Thank you.
For the roadmap, in the beginning, which is on off on theory, so you can flow that where we can go all before. And then I will be going through all three when it's clearly your side will flow. I have three overviews that are weighing as well as overviews for the case. I'll sign first those, and then I'll go down for one. In different ways. Ready? First group, all the theory responses together at the point that a cold dropper observation 1. The New York Times tells you specifically the shift in welfare is toward the programs we advocate in our case. At the point when he ignored that, the trend happening right now is very predictable because we read the evidence from 2003 that since now welfare has been going to job training and education, which he cold drop. This is key because the second reason is this is a very predictable argument. These are arguments that are in the briefs. But why you leave this to the voters? Why you leave this actually to what you're going to be voting on for the Times Q? This is the final round of the TOC. Do not let them get up here and read 1 minute can of one off. That's detrimental to education and public forum debate for 3 reasons. The first reason is that's going to be leaving all these people watching here, they're going to be able to see that I can just do theory stuff instead of actually having the threat. The second reason is discourages debate, and that's what actually leads people to be leading debate. And the third reason, the most important reason, is the actual link back to my response to the theory that the fact that none of this is actually that unpredictable. We're giving you the most predictable program. They don't know what's predictable. It's when you drop New York Times observation 1, don't let them get that. Now on the overviews on their cases, which is begin with observation 1. We're going to be talking about prioritization. But the only thing that actually talks about prioritization is around. You turn their definition of the Merriam-Webster dictionary in 2016. Alleviation of poverty doesn't mean decreasing poverty. It means decreasing the effect of their impacts. That's used in today's ground because we're alleviating the short-term prioritization. They don't give you any reason why you need private infrastructure in the short term. At the point when we hand them the evidence that tells you every 6 months these people wait, they're less likely to be employed. Prioritize it right now because every moment you sit on your butt and don't help these people, they're going to be lower their income in the long term. That's key for prioritization. But secondly, in the long term, even if you want to buy their framework, you need to alleviate long-term income inequality. We do that best through education. The Cornell Sun card also dropped my opponent that says the prerequisite education to alleviate income inequality. That's how you get out of the poverty trap. But the second overview on their piece comes from jobs that tells you special interest is what decides where you put public transportation infrastructure, all types of public infrastructure in the real world. That's key because Real Clear Policy tells you 85% of the time with community development grants, it's going to wealthier than average neighborhood. They never prove you probability in the real world as they attack us on our own real world framework, hold them to it, so they have to prove to you that these are actually going to poor neighborhoods when 85% of the time they don't go to poor neighborhoods. But thirdly, according to Oxford, even when you look to the benefits of their programs, 9 out of 10 times they overestimate benefits and underestimate costs. That's huge in city ground because their benefits are coming from contractors, not from a government source where we give you, where we're talking about actual benefits. But now let's go to the lie resident potential one. First, you need no unique link to income inequality. All they're saying is that people have more money through the $3,000, which is not specific to low-income people. That's specific to average income and all Americans. That's key because the University of Georgia tells you because of the warrant that I said earlier that special interests dominate infrastructure spending long term, which they want you to look at, infrastructure spending increases inequality by 4%. That's huge because secondly, we look to these are not actually failing. Our infrastructure is not failing the status quo. The American Society of Civil Engineers tells you it's actually getting a better rating, and our bridges that have been deficient have decreased by half in the past 20 years. That's even if you don't buy that, there's a $315 billion bill that just passed last year to shore up the infrastructure, so there's no need for the problem. But fourthly, according to the Atlantic, you turn their argument because maintenance really isn't that sexy to Congress, and what they're going to be doing is taking any spending you give them and spend that on more projects, which creates backlog. 53% of all spending is spent on 1.7% of roads and new projects. That's a turn right there. Group all their job impacts together. Firstly, these come from the $3,100. That's not, excuse me, this is separate from jobs. $3,100 is an average income not specific to these people. But group the jobs together. First, according to the CBO, when you look to where the money could be spent otherwise, there's no net benefit. And secondly, we solve for jobs better, specifically with our training. And over time, these people, the longer they're unemployed, the less likely they are to get a job. That's your prioritization. Now, contention two about revitalization. The first impact is a turn on their gentrification. They can see that rich people move to these neighborhoods. But the only evidence they read you to say that why poor people stay is because property values increase. We agree, but what their Pollock study doesn't tell you is while property values increase, so does rent. That makes logical sense. Rent increases by 75%, but the majority of poor people don't have properties that they own because they can't benefit. They can't get kicked out by rent. That's why Morehouse College tells you on balance, there is no cure for gentrification. There is only treatment so it hurts the poor. That takes all their impacts, even if you don't buy the link chart. Look at their impacts together. Holistically, we would argue that prioritization, there's no need to do this. If you really care about moving people, you could do this on an intercepted way, like housing vouchers. For the poor of America and all, we are very proud to
That was kind of important for like education.
Are we good? Okay, so will you talk about your definition of alleviation? Just explain it.
Sure. So we're about to get the reason. Okay. Our analysis of this, if the resolution doesn't say decrease income inequality, it says alleviate, right? Sure. And so we tie that into prioritization, which means like we want to alleviate the most pressing impacts. So alleviating it. So we would argue.
So could you explain what are the most pressing impacts?
What do you mean?
Like, what are the most pressing impacts?
I mean, that's what I was about to say. But I would argue that the most pressing impact of like income inequality is the fact that you're being unemployed and education. So the
Wait,
longer
like,
and
even if we solve unemployment, income inequality is still here, right?
no, because we tell you the jobs and the education. First of all, Cornell said education is a prerequisite. That's how you climb out of poverty. That's totally unresponsive in your rebuttal. Like I'm not gonna like let's respond to now.
Okay, I mean like the Sharkey analysis literally says
So
it
let's
accounts
talk
for
about
education.
Sharkey. What's the title of the Sharkey analysis?
I don't know, do you want me to pull it up?
Does that have anything to do with income inequality or racial?
It has to do with both, I think. Let me pull it up. Do you want me to do it now?
Yeah, we can like talk about that later. The Sharkey is what we read on reparations. It has nothing to do with
Okay,
that.
it's called Neighborhoods and the Black-White Mobility Gap.
Okay. Like a couple of responses to Pell Grants. But we never talk about like expanding Pell Grants in your conventional sense. We're talking about the fast track Pell Grants, which is going to be 15 credits and the summer. You don't respond to that at all.
Actually, we do. We make the argument that 47% of Pell Grants go out unfilled because people just don't want to fill out the forms.
Hold on.
That's why a lot of money is wasted.
But we're not like impacting it. Okay, first of all, that's not money wasted. That's just people who don't claim it. $2 million isn't like money we waste.
Just means that we don't need to expand it.
But we need to expand to people who do claim it. Our benefits don't necessarily expand the program. Like if there's 100 people on Pell Grants, it doesn't make it to 200. It just makes it fast track for those 100 people. So all your responses are unresponsive.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. Can I have a question? Sure. So on the off, you basically say a lot of things. But the first thing that you say is the trend is very predictable, right? So So does predictability have to do with the ability that you can kick out of responses that I make on your arguments?
I'm sorry?
Like just because we knew that you could have been running these arguments, does that like necessarily mean that you can't still like generate a positive time trade-off by not extending certain arguments?
So sure, I understand like the time trade-off and times the argument you make in your voter, but like what I would argue, and shows can get this in something, I just like to spend some time on one-off because we thought it was a little important. But what we would argue, which is like we should be able to pick our advocacy because this is public forum data. If you want to
I'm not
argue,
disagreeing.
hold on, can I finish? If you want to argue like for time skew, like that's more like a policy where you have like the back-to-back of the 14 minute speech, right? In public forum debate where we all get even amounts of time, like incrementally, we think it's okay for us to like collapse into an argument. That's what the essence of it is. In fact, like per NFL rules,
Okay,
it's
I
like
don't think
public
that's
forum
very
is about
responsive to our arguments. Like, we say that even if you do collapse into arguments that we don't know which ones you're going for, which means that you get as much time as you want to extend a single plan, while we had to spend our entire AC like responding to all of your
Like,
plans.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying like
Like, it doesn't make sense that just because
Okay,
this is policy debate that there
the
isn't a
same
time
exact
frame.
thing would apply to you when you talk about like conventional transportation infrastructure, and then you talk about revitalization. How do I know which one you're going to go for? I don't.
I'd
So
say we
just
go
wanted
to
to
vote. Yes.
I see that this is sums
Yeah.
up. Second is really going to arguments based on evidence.
Okay, so I'm going to start on the side. I'm going to address the students above, the lesson, second contentions, and then second times on it. And at the very end, if I have time, I'll try to go back to the period violation.
Extend the interpretation of the affirmative may not read more than one unconditional advocacy. It could extend the violation every four and concede the violation in process. Extend the reciprocity standards much easier to gain access to dollars running multiple times, gives them multiple works to dollars. This puts that important on structural advantage. Reciprocity kits, for instance, the insurance leaders have to do the same amount of work to ensure access to the ballot. They say that their first observation response to their evidence doesn't say that the new money is going into only these four programs they talk about, but even so it's not responsive to the reciprocity standard. They have a structural advantage because they can choose which one of those plans to go for and kick out a large part of the matches rebuttal. Even if they don't do that, they still buy into the second part of our voter, because they created that risk of abuse in the first cross-site, which forced Max to read the show, which puts a structural disadvantage in substance for the rest of the round. Now, he says it's bad for education, but he discourages checking abuse, which would encourage debaters to lead debate much, much more. If people are asking to read abusive cases like they are and take abusive positions like that, that sounds much, much more like much, much less appealing to debaters than just a simple theory argument made to take care of that abuse. But now going to be overviewed. The first one is alleviation, the definition of alleviation, but they don't give you a reason for further definition. We give you, we tell you that it's the first definition on Merriam-Webster. The second thing he says is the special, it talks about special interest. But McNicholas 2016 says the local government receives 75% of grants and manage the majority of the cost of maintaining and improving infrastructure. This means the majority of money is out of the hands of special interest groups. But second, as levels of government get farther and farther away from the people elected them, local involvement becomes more unaccountable. However, local municipalities experience nothing of the sort, so there's less corruption at the local level. But now under contention, the first thing he says is the rents increased 75%, but he clearly didn't listen to the the Sharkey evidence says that's the #1 way to upward mobility. That is clearly a reason to prioritize. But now look at their case. They don't give you a reason to prioritize. Their Atlantic evidence doesn't say that the problem gets worse as time progresses. It just says that people are unemployed for 6 months and they can't go and get a job. But both sides fall under that problem. We create jobs immediately just like they claim that they do. So this evidence really doesn't matter. But then we tell you that governments can only handle one issue at a time. The Tyson and Reynolds evidence links into this, and so the governments have to prioritize now, but the multiplier effect will make it much more expensive to do in the future, like disproportionately hurting poor people. For these reasons, we strongly urge the vote for this bill.
Okay, so, this is our time roadmap. The way it's gonna go is, talking about the theory cell, and then briefly on their case, and then, okay. So, we can address don't forget that my opponents do uphold their own burden when they kick out of their first contention, so don't apply to the same burden. And secondly, public forum debate is different from policy because the speech time gets shorter as the round goes on, so you have to collapse. It's not the same thing as policy. You can't just take a theory shell from policy and cross the line to public forum debate. So this doesn't apply whatsoever because extend the fact that Harvard tells me that it discourages people from public forum debate and it makes it non-educational. They never respond to this. Now don't forget Arvin's second overview where he tells you that 90% of them overestimate the project. And the third response where he tells you that according to real clear politics, that it doesn't go to the places that it's intended to be. Extend that throughout the flow. Now with that in mind, let's move on to our the flow. Let's start with the contention one. My point is here trying to tell you that there is no prioritization, but extend the Center for American Progress, which specifically tells you that for every 1 year you miss, you decrease earnings by 2 to 3%. Right there, we're showing prioritization. And secondly, we're solving for this problem. We handed them the card, and we showed them that after 6 months, the chance of them getting a job is only 2%. So even though my opponents come over here trying to tell you that they're creating jobs, all these jobs are going to wealthy people and middle-class people, because the people who have been unemployed for more than 6% can't get these jobs. We're specifically solving for these problems because when these people get employed, they can specifically get these government training programs that we explained our contention one sub-1. Remember, for every $1 billion we spend, we give 57,000 jobs created. Now, extend our sub-point B, where he's telling you that according to the Brookings Institute, we're increasing the training programs through the Department of Labor. And according to Hamilton, this vocational training increases employment by 30%, and this leads to 65% more income. Now, let's move on to the most impactful today's round, which is going to be programs. The folks come over here trying to tell you that $3 billion is not claimed. You can't just take this money away from them. They're entitled to this money, so you can't just take it away from them. And we're expanding the program in a different way. Now, in response to the third response is look empirically, where he's specifically telling you when you look to the past that when you remove the Pell Grants, there was a 47% decrease in enrollment, and we show you in the past it increased graduation rates by 20%. We proved that empirically this works. So prove this over anything my opponents give to you, because according to the Cornell Sun, education is a prerequisite to income inequality, and we tell you we're going to be increasing wages. And for all these reasons, I am strong. I don't even contact.
Yeah. Okay, so you say that we would uphold our own. How is our first contention like not part of our second contention?
Also, like we did extend the project. You didn't extend a single part.
I
Extended Tyson and Reynolds.
Yeah, it's not related to like terminal offense contention.
It's what I think is 2 cards we'll get on there.
Hold on. What I would argue is the difference between contention 1 and contention 2 is the actual evidence. For example, like if $3,000 comes from the American Society of Civil Engineers. That's what, can I finish talking? Can I finish talking? That's talking about shoring up current infrastructure. The advocacy for your contention 1 is to shore up current infrastructure. But then you pick it when you're doing your summary. Hold on. You pick it when you're going through your summary, and even if you believe you extended 2 with the card, like is that really the best way to like teach education? Joe could have done 1 card in Head Start and you would just fine. Your second contention is about.
Let me respond to your stuff. Okay. So you say that like we bite into the same burden, but explain how me dropping my first contention was abusive to you. Like, do you want to win off of terms of my first contention? Because it doesn't look like you didn't extend anything somewhere.
And like besides, like
Okay,
the
but
options
you're
are being
saying,
made from
like,
extending
I
terms.
tell you that you're applying a theory shell from policy debate and trying to transfer it into public forum debate.
Policy debate
It doesn't
speech
work
goes down as
because
well.
in public forum debate you go from a 4-minute speech to a 2-minute
Policy
speech. And
debate
in the
speech
past
collapse
it was
as
a
well.
1-minute speech. So clearly you do have the collapse.
Can you let
Like
us
you can't
answer
just
that?
like
Policy
cross-apply
debaters
a
have to-
theory shell
Can
from
you let us
policy.
answer that?
Policy debaters have to collapse their arguments as well. We can do that as well. I'm actually going to go for theory in the next speech so it doesn't become like too spread out.
Wait, so we
But-
can collapse arguments? Yeah, but you can't collapse on unconditional arguments because when we read terms, those exist on the flow if it's unconditional, it's conditional, but they don't exist when you kick out of arguments and they just don't happen when you affirm.
I understand that unconditional, but what I would argue is first, you don't need that to be kicked out of your conditional. And also, if you look at our flow, the only one we kicked out of that showed didn't go for it was sub-point A.
Then you're shifting from what you said in the first cross-sex. Like, you conceded to the views in the first cross-sex.
Can I ask
Max
you a
came and read a shell in the rebuttal.
Can I ask you a question? What's more important to you? Like short-term prioritization or long-term, like breaking, like the cyclical nature of bonds? Let's go long-term. Long-term? Yeah. Okay. Like, for any reason why? Because we both impact it. Okay, we also impact the prioritization. Okay, let's do it.
Okay, let me ask a question.
No, that's super important, because I want to do that in order to prioritization of resolution doesn't matter.
It does.
So how does that not, like, priority means urgency time frame?
We would say that governments can only do one thing at a time, but it depends on
Wait,
what's more
whoa,
important, right?
wait, where in the Commonwealth do we stop infrastructure spending? Yeah, like, it's just
It's
infrastructure.
the Jones evidence that says that governments drop issues from consideration, but that doesn't matter, right? Like,
remember what I said in my rebuttal about prioritization, that we can just like get these people employed or get them off unemployment, and they're still shoring up in the status quo your infrastructure. There's no like complete trade-off. Okay, resolution says don't stop one thing.
Okay, let me explain. So the Jones evidence says when there's this much looking at the upheaval of politics, it's going to hold up the government. They can only do one of those at a time. So you
The
can't
Jones evidence is
Wait,
not
let me-
looking at the
okay, look, don't let me
2016
interrupt
TFP
you.
resolution, okay?
Okay, let me finish.
Policy baseball now. Like it's a shell is just fat. Shell is just like liquid. Just regions like this, just highlight the height. Exactly. Theory means how we should be. How we should be doing.
and then Send the interpretation, they only get one unconditional advocacy. Extend the violation, they have 4, and in summary, they only extend 3. Then the standard specifically, we have to defend the arguments that we read like unconditionally, right? Like when they respond to our case and we don't extend that argument, their offense still exists on the flow. They're still generating offense off of the argument that we didn't extend. But when we read offense of their arguments and they don't extend those arguments, that offense disappears because when you vote for the affirmative or the negative, those plans no longer happen, which means that they do indeed get a positive trade-off, and we, kicking out our plans, do not bite into our own violation. They don't understand that argument. Now, specifically on predictability, even if they arguments were predictable, we don't know which one they were going to collapse into. We didn't know they were going to kick subpoint via contention 1, so we have to respond to each argument at every single one of them. That creates a positive time trade-off. Now, they're going to make this argument in policy. This is applicable and in public forum it's not, but it's probably more so applicable in public forum because we have less prep time to adjudicate adjust our strategy, which is why the radicals already become irreparably skewed. Then they say the NSDA encourages collapsing, but they don't encourage running advocacy that are unconditional, and specifically they turn our side of contention, we kick out of it, but they get offense. It's not the same the other way around. They still definitely bite into violations, which means that you vote on the idea of fairness and how you have to evaluate the debate of this one who's better, and their structural advantages make it impossible for them to win, especially because they don't accept this argument about theory is bad. But even then, that entire argument is really egregious because it literally says we can't punish abusive cases. We shouldn't run theory. That argument is inherently biased towards teams that are trying to defeat abusive cases, which makes it set the precedent in the long run, which prevents us from beating these cases back in the future. Now on our second contention. They only read like 3 responses. The first one is that like people leave because of rent, but like Freeman accounts for that and says that because there's like better jobs in the region and like more affordable housing, people stay. There's 24% more residential stability. Then they also say that there's no reason to prioritize. But that's the Sharkey evidence that says that it outweighs not only the educational income gap, but also things like neighborhood poverty and intergenerational poverty are far outweighed. Insofar as that's true, you can give us the impact at the very bottom from Hearst that says that when like rich people move into neighborhoods, like incomes rise, and that as a result, like integration increases like available infrastructure, accessibility to things like that. And Sharkey definitely outweighs their entire case. They don't respond to that except for in the process.
He didn't win there.
Summary on their case, and then get to our side. Right? Is everyone ready? Starting on the idea theory. Remember, I began my response to theory and rebuttal. They didn't respond to those in summary. They're new in this too. That's key in today's round because the responses they make are specific to the ones I made in my rebuttal, not the ones Show made, but specifically on the responses Show made. Firstly, remember, they don't meet their own burden at the point when they kick from contention 1, and I had turns on that as well. That's key in today's round because they're running an unconditioned as well. That's important because Show goes for all of ours except 1, but remember the second response Show gives you, which is the idea of collapsing in public forum debates. That's huge in today's round because they spend the majority of their time talking about theory, but remember the educational aspect I said in my rebuttal that never went responded. This is the final round of the Tournament of Champions in public forum debate, and that sends the wrong message to the debater community that you can read a 1-minute theory shell that has everything to do with any pro-advocacy, and they don't have to prep out specific things. We give you the New York Times, which I also read my rebuttal, that tells you it's highly probable, and that links back into their core theory shell about reciprocity. But now let's go on their case. First, Show extends to observation 2 and 3, that the overview observation 2 and 3. Firstly, that our 85% is specific to community development grants, and that's localities, there's corruption there. But additionally, the cold dropped Oxford, 90% of these programs overestimate benefits and underestimate costs. That takes up any offense they get from their purely only contention 2. But also remember on the contention 2, I told you it's on net, not good for the poor, and there's no cure for gentrification, and the rent prices increase. But what's important in denying their Sharkey is remember this has nothing to do with income inequality. It has to do with racial inequality. But now let's get to our case. Remember we went on prioritization of the job employment. That's from the observation 1, how we break the cycle of poverty, but now we're talking about prioritization. The Center for American Progress tells you we need to get these people off unemployment right now. The resolution says prioritize, that's what we do. That's the Hamilton Project, 30% we also handed to them from the subpoint via vocational training. If you want to look to their long-term framework of long-term solvency, we saw we do better with Pell Grants. Remember, empirically it works. Their Canada response has nothing to do with our program. Empirically it's increased graduation rates and enrollment, and Cornell, that's the prerequisite to alleviate. In the short term, which is the resolution, and the long term, we win.
My parents think we should like coffee.
They literally don't extend their contention one and make it bad enough, and I was like,
I thought they had like 7
Really, like I would say, a solid 70% of the debate. Because then it 2 minutes, and it also takes like understanding.
can't stop it.
And they were so good. Like, I think about like I think this is like the real issue.
They change it.
Even if they don't win, people are gonna like it.
So what did they decide?
They said they were saying
Wait, so afterwards, how did they go scoring a policy? Not a critique.
Under Alvin was a policy.
Head Start help
Hey guys! The judges are trying to deliberate over cards.
I supported MSJ at like European and whoever went like 10 different advocacies, but this is very ridiculous. But this isn't really ridiculous.
I think they were right to like I think the beer shows on something like this.
No, not in this case. I think it can be right if they have like too many advocates, like whoever. That was fine. That was acceptable. If they have 4 advocacies.
But we're still quite a bit if you like do
45 seconds please.
I know, but it's still like if you won what is it, like if you win one of them then you won.
That way.
You don't have to turn.
Maybe it's 6.
What?
I'm just guessing that
This is actually so bad. You might have teams that score like 1 contention, and then someone wants 3 advocates. Like, that's unfair. 2 advocates, that's unfair. You don't need to
Oh, for the reparation team, 2 advocates.
Wait. Oh, wait. We have morals and 2 advocates.
Morals and morals. No one's gonna like rebut moral.
Theory debates are so stupid in my opinion. It's not what debate is about.
College policy
Strange, but you go for theory when they know they can't win over policy.
No, I think that the point Baiju made that like just really make things so that they don't have to type and just can run through.
No, but sometimes theory will seem ridiculous. Like when you go to the two advocacies, like I don't know.
And people like if they win, people will start doing that. People inevitably will start doing that. Go on one contention like that, two advocacies.
Seems like not
The Arnison's round too much like this.
That one didn't happen.